Yeah, I always make the case that Warren Buffett doesn't announce in advance when he's buying or selling a stock. So why would the Bank of England announce in advance that they're selling gold, if not to have a propaganda effect? But I mean, the so-called brown bottom, Gordon Brown's decision was actually the bottom of the market, and it's been gold's been higher ever since. Is it simply because gold was so undervalued at that level that it really couldn't go any lower, and the smart money started coming in and recognizing the undervaluation?
I think so. In addition, you did some work back when which helped out immensely about what the real gold loan situation was. And it started with my friend Frank Veneroso and so on. He wrote about it again before it was started, that they were much bigger than most people knew. And that, again, it had to do with Robert Rubin and a lot of these other people who was at Goldman Sachs at the time, and all these different gold loans that a lot of people were using, corporations, to finance their operations. So they were very, very large. And I know you did some work on this, and Reg Howe did some work on this, that the gold loans were much bigger back then. And what I'm trying to say is the central banks have gone through much more of their gold than people know. If the average person in the industry, or we'll say, what do the central banks own of gold? And they'll just throw out 30,000 tons. Well, I want to speak for yourself, James, but I think it's more, they only have like 10 or 12,000 tons left. Years ago, we thought it was 15 and 16, and some of the hedgers have returned some of their gold. But the bottom line is the central banks don't have the gold they say they have. Frank Veneroso at our conference in Durban, with the price of gold at $256 an ounce, said the central banks, May 2001, will run out of gold. It's selling as a group in 7 to 10 years. And in exactly 8.5 years later, December of 2009, the European central banks stopped selling gold. So what I'm saying here is that it started going up. The banks don't have the gold they say they have anymore. They've gone through their silver. They're managing their retreat. And a lot of people back then, like yourself, saw what was happening and knew that those prices were unsustainable. Although I might say, once again, the establishment back then was telling the likes of Barrick Gold and Anglo Gold to do massive hedging operations right at the bottom, and they got killed. Stuff that they were hedging at $300 and $400 and $500 have now been covered at $1,000 and $1,300 respectively. It was a disaster, and that's part of the thing I'm going to present tonight. Look, this is what we had to say back then. What do we know? This is what they had to say, and look what happened.
Yeah, back in as you may recall, at the Dawson City conference, I was making the point about the deception in central bank accounting, that they show gold in the vault and gold out in loan as one line item. So you couldn't really determine how much gold they really had in their vault and how much gold was put at risk by lending it to a bullion bank or whoever. And the gold loans were a big issue back then. I don't think the gold loans are as big an issue today. And let me get your thoughts on this in the sense that what's happened over the past several years. People have become so concerned about all of the other issues out there, and there's so much paper relative to the amount of gold that central banks have. The rush out of paper into gold seems to be underway, and that the gold loan is no longer the big factor.
That's pretty much true. But again, it strikes me that the reasons that gold and silver are doing what they're doing, you've been pounding the table on for years, and quite frankly, we have on our side of the Gada camp, and now all of a sudden it's like people are surprised. What's the big surprise? It was so obvious some time ago. So when it comes to the gold loans, I think part of it is because you're right, there's so many other things to get into, and actually it's already happened. That was the story back then. We knew what was going to happen and why, and now it's already happened, so there's other things to move on to. But still, it's going to be very interesting to, what I want to try to explain, well, why can the price of gold still go way, way, way up from here? The central banks, and it's important, they don't have the gold that people think they have. So they can't all of a sudden say, oh, the price is high, we're going to sell all this gold. No, you don't have it.
Yeah, but even if they try to sell it or propaganda, put up propaganda that they're going to sell it to try to depress the gold price. They've gone to the well too many times with that story, with that propaganda. I mean, look at the IMF example. How many times did Gordon Brown and others say that they're going to get the IMF to sell their gold? The IMF finally sold 400 tons and it got snapped up just like that. Because the market is starting to sense that there's a lot more paper out there relative to gold. So they're sort of losing their propaganda power that they once had. Isn't that an indication that this market is is changed fundamentally?
It's changed fundamentally for many, many reasons. One of the reasons now that you saw coming way ahead of everyone else and advised people properly to buy gold at 3 and 4 and 5, 600 are now becoming so obvious and pronounced, and they're actualized, they're happening at 1,500. People see what's coming, and it's not good, you know, with the inflation numbers in the United States, stagflation. But most importantly, I think, or just as importantly, is what's happening outside of the Western world. I mean, with the Chinese, the Russians. The Russians know all about GATA. The Chinese know all about what GATA has to say. I've been on 3 conference calls. As you were on some conference calls yourself with the Chinese investment corporations. They know what we know. And of course, the Chinese is an open story. They're encouraging all their people to buy gold and silver, whereas in the United States, the word gold and silver are never mentioned unless they have to be.
Yeah, outside the Western world, the view of gold is entirely different than within the West. You know, most of the world actually recognizes the reality that gold is money. It's only, you know, within the Western environment, you know, those influenced by Keynes and others, you know, that gold doesn't have a role to play as money, which is completely absurd to by far the vast majority of the population of the world.